And that is what a Jew must be today. If necessary, a lonely voice in the wilderness. Hopefully you find other Jews together. But if you have to be the only one, you have to be the only one. You have to do what's right no matter what. Some of you may come from college campuses, I don't know, where maybe there aren't that many Jews there, or if there are Jews there, they're not committed to the Torah. But you got to be strong. You have to be willing to do what is right, even if nobody else is doing it. So what are our three names? Yehudi, gratitude. Yisrael, confidence and resilience that eventually these ideals will triumph. And Ivri, the moral courage to stand against the crowd and don't give in to peer pressure. And it's been well said that even a dead fish can swim with the current. To go with the current doesn't mean anything. Even if you're dead, the water is going to carry you. The proof that someone is vibrant and alive is when they have the courage to buck the currents, to go against what the prevailing zeitgeist morality is. And that takes a very, very strong person. But that is how character is forged, and that's what it means to be a Jew. You know, there's a very interesting article in the, I don't know if you probably don't get it in South Africa, but in America there's a popular culture magazine called Rolling Stone magazine. And Rolling Stone is about, you know, rock and roll and rap music and things like that, and drug culture. You know, it's not necessarily the most kosher of magazines. But around 30 years ago, they allowed a reporter to write really a definitive article on the return of Jews to Judaism. Now, why would they be interested in that? Because they thought there may be some cult angle. There was a woman reporter, had a brother who came to Jerusalem, and the brother became religious, and she wanted to investigate, and Rolling Stone thought, well, perhaps there's some cult thing here, drug thing here, and they gave her like unlimited space. They gave her 20 pages to write about this. So to this day, it's really one of the definitive treatments of the phenomenon of Jews returning to Judaism, which of course we know in South Africa has been a magnificent development, even much more so than the United States. And I remember at the time, many rabbis wanted to get hold of this magazine, but they were embarrassed to walk into a convenience store and buy a Rolling Stone magazine because maybe some of their students would see them. You know, it doesn't look good for a rabbi with a beard and a black hat to be buying a Rolling Stone magazine. How do you explain it? So I remember one of the rabbis in Chicago, where I was living at the time, he waited till Saturday night, 2 a.m. in the morning, to go to a 7-Eleven to buy a Rolling Stone magazine. And when he went in, he figured nobody would see him, but of course, the boys that he had for his Shabbos guests happened to be walking at exactly the same time. So, you know, you can't escape it. If God wants people to know, they're going to know. But in this magazine, the woman describes a conversation that she had with Rabbi Noach Weinberg of blessed memory, one of the great pioneers in Jewish outreach, just died a short while ago. And Rabbi Weinberg asked her, what do you think the goal of life is? What is the thing that human beings want more than anything else? So she answered, the thing that human beings want more than anything else is pleasure. Now, he could have called her a hedonist, he could have called her a Baal Taiva, he could have called her a lot of things. He says, you're right. Human beings want pleasure. He accepted. He then asked her, and what is the opposite of pleasure? What is the thing they need to avoid more than anything else? So she said, human beings want to avoid pain. Right? Pleasure. Right? You seek pleasure, you want to avoid pain. Rabbi Weinberg disagreed. He says, no, pain is not the opposite of pleasure. There is no pleasure without pain. The opposite of pleasure is comfort. So she did not understand, because comfort and pleasure seem to be, at least roughly, synonymous. In what way is pleasure the opposite of comfort? So he explained, and he gave a sports example. Let's imagine you have a kid who wants to be the best basketball player on his team, or these gymnasts who want to practice for the Olympics and then get a gold medal. So what do these kids do for 4 years? They get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They practice for 3 hours before school and after school. and they work, and they sacrifice a social life, and they sacrifice all sorts of recreational activities, and there's a lot of pain. But at the end of the day, they have the exquisite pleasure of accomplishing something. Comfort is when you didn't bother to get out of bed. Rabbi Weinberg said, Judaism never claims to be a comfortable way of life. You know, you stick out being a Jew. You can't eat what other people eat. You don't do what other people do. You have restrictions. It's not comfortable. A Jew doesn't always fit in. But Judaism doesn't claim to be about comfort. But Judaism claims to be about pleasure. That when a person learns discipline, when a person learns commitment, when a person learns to live by morality, even if other people aren't doing it, when a person does what is right, even if people are laughing at you for being honest in business, but you keep your sense of integrity and your sense of authenticity, there's a deep, deep pleasure that you can have within you. That you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I am living a meaningful life. I'm living a moral life. I'm living a good life. I'm living a godly life. And that doesn't come from comfort, but that comes from the pleasure of making hard decisions and sticking with them. So this is a very important idea, that Judaism is not about making your life easy. It's not going to make your life easy. But it can bring you a great, great pleasure by, well, first of all, even metaphysically, when you're living in sync with God's law, then you're in the zone, so to speak. You're doing what you ought to be doing. Now, there is a certain feeling a person has that, you know, I'm sure you've had this. This is called being in the zone or being in the flow. I think flow is the more modern term. The idea of being in the flow is there's kind of a almost weightlessness. When you're doing the right thing, sometimes you get, sometimes you're into something. It might be an intellectual problem. It might be an athletic activity. And you just become one with the experience. It's as if you're being carried. It's as if there's a force that's greater than you that's just lifting you up. Right? Sometimes everything is so effortless. Effortless in the sense that you're working hard, but you have this energy that's propelling you. And sometimes, even the act of lifting a spoon to your mouth is so much effort. Right? So there's a concept of being in the flow. Now, being in the flow doesn't mean you're not working. And it doesn't mean you're not struggling. And it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of strain going on. But when you feel you're in the right place, doing the right thing, it doesn't bother you. You're not upset, you're energized. And you keep on going. And that's ideally what a Jewish life should be like. Now, am I going to tell you we're always functioning on that level? No. I'm not going to make any false advertisements to you. But this is what we aspire to. And the more that one internalizes the moral fabric of Judaism, the more one can try to live a life of that type of wholeness and that type of integrity that can carry you on. Okay? So I think thinking about the three names of Judaism, gratitude, resilience in terms of hope for the future, and courage to stand up against peer pressure, that's the Ivri name, are things that can really give us a lot of guidance as we face the different conflicts that we face. Now, let me mention too that gratitude is actually a foundation of relationships, of men-women relationships. That if one has to have gratitude, because if one is grateful to the other, then one can build a very, very strong marriage. And here, let me talk a little bit about the man-woman dynamic, because that is a subset, a very important subset of gratitude in our lives. If you go back to Genesis, Genesis says God created Adam, and there actually is an argument in the Gemara, did God create man and then create woman, as the Chumash seems to indicate? Or did God create a male-female composite, and then he split them? Right? That's the source of the expression, my other half, my better half, etc. It's an argument. So, but for our purposes, it's not important which way we look at it. Was there first man and then woman? Or was there the man-woman unit that God split? It's an argument in the Gemara. But God ultimately says, it is not good for man to be alone. Let me make him a helpmate to be opposite him. And then you know the story. God caused Adam to fall asleep, and then God separated something from Adam and made it into a woman, and he had a helpmate. Now let's analyze the two parts of this verse. It is not good for man to be alone. Why isn't it good? What's wrong with being alone? Remember, in this context, Adam is in the Garden of Eden. Now, in the Garden of Eden, he has an infinite capacity to enjoy all of the delights of the earth, except for one little tree, but he has all these trees, all these fruits. He doesn't need clothing. He can walk around naked. He has the total ability to enjoy really 99.99999% of what is in the world. Everything but one tree. What is so bad about being alone? So there's a beautiful interpretation of one of the commentaries that man in a state of aloneness has an infinite capacity to take, but without a partner, he does not have the ability to give, to share. Now, God is the ultimate giver, not taker, because there's nothing you can give to God. God is God by virtue of giving. We are made in the image of God. We can only become godly if we learn to give rather than take. As a result, we have a slight retranslation of the phrase. Instead of translating the phrase, it is not good for a man to be alone, you can translate the phrase this way: man cannot be in a state of goodness when he is alone, because the ultimate goodness is God. God is giver rather than taker. Man in a state of taking cannot be in a state of goodness. Basically saying, we become godly and truly alive only when we can learn to transcend our egotism, our selfishness, our possessiveness. Only when we stop having the mental mindset of looking after number one. So this is an amazing thought. So God, there was a president in the United States before you guys were born, John F. Kennedy, and he, one of the famous passages in his inaugural address was, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. In fact, the Torah is telling us that the man-woman dynamic was created not so that my needs will be satisfied, but to teach me to learn to care about another, to love another, to become a giver in life rather than a taker. And in the process of becoming a giver rather than a taker, I become a more godly person. And of course, the same is from the woman's perspective, both sides. Marriage was created to enable us to give rather than to take. Now, if you think about it, if each person brings that orientation to the table, then the marriage will be very, very happy. The relationship will be very deep. This creates a paradox in life. And that is, altruistic giving can be the best way to get your selfish needs met as well. Because the concept is, when each person focuses on themselves, then each person is not giving to the other. I only care about me and she only cares about her. None of us are helping each other. But if I care about my wife and I do what I can for her and she cares about me and does whatever she can for me, so it now happens, I get what I need, she gets what I need, what she needs. In other words, altruism and giving is the best policy for your selfish interests. What do they say? They have an old legend. I don't think it's a medrash, but I think it's a Hasidic parable that they give about Gehenna. That, we talk about paradise and we talk about hell. And they basically say that in both paradise and hell, you have people sitting at a real wonderful banquet. Imagine, right, you're sitting on both sides of a table, wonderful food, right? But the problem is you don't have your elbow joints. Your arms are extended and you can't bend. So the Rishayim, the evil people, are looking at all of this wonderful food and they have no way of bringing it to their mouths because their arms don't bend. But the righteous people are sitting at the same table. And the righteous people have the same disability, so to speak. So why do they get to enjoy? So it says, because each one feeds the righteous people on the other side. Meaning to say, let's say we're sitting, of course, it depends how wide the table is, but the table is wide enough where my arms can reach you and your arms can reach me. When I only think about myself, I will be frustrated and deprived. But if I would just give a little thought to helping the other person, then their needs would be met and my needs would. Right? You hear the mashal. In other words, it doesn't even occur to the selfish person that he could give the food to the other and the other could give it to them. I'm only thinking about me and I can't get it to me. But the righteous person thinks about helping the other person. That's why they say, the term for the Dead Sea, although that's not the Hebrew term for the Dead Sea is the Yam HaMelech, the Salt Sea. But the English term is the Dead Sea, and it's called dead because the mineral content is so high in the Dead Sea, that's why you can float, that there really is no life in the Dead Sea. But some offer this explanation. The Dead Sea receives water that flows into it, but nothing flows out. If all you do is take and you don't give, you're dead. Life means to give, to share. Now, ideally, the highest expression is in marriage and parenting, that's to be sure. But that doesn't mean until you're married, you just put it on hold. This is the way we approach friendships. This is the way we approach human interactions. We try to become givers in life, people who are there to strengthen other people. My job, your job, is to build people up and not cut them down. With our words, with our gestures, right? Words are very powerful. Words can build up, words can destroy. Try to be a builder in life. Try to be somebody who helps people. And then you're spiritually alive. Then you're godly. Then you're good. They tell the story, just to give you an example of how we often misinterpret what love is. We think love is love when really it's self-gratification. A boy was once eating fish, and a great rabbi saw him in the dining room and said, "Why are you eating fish?" And the boy's response was, "I'm eating fish because I love fish." So the rabbi said, "If you love fish, why are you chewing it and spitting out the bones? If you love the fish, you would put it in an aquarium or release it into the ocean. You don't mean you love fish. You mean you love yourself, and you're using the fish as a tool to feed your self-love." The point of this story is that that's often how we use love in the general world as well. I love somebody often means I use them as a tool for my self-gratification. But that's not true love. True love is to care about the other and to become a giver rather than a taker. That's how you love. But there's a subtlety here, and here's a very important point I want to bring out. And that is, sometimes learning to give requires that you be open to take. Sometimes the greatest giving you can do is to let the other person give something to you. I'm sure, even as South Africans, you've heard of Benjamin Franklin, one of the great founding fathers of the United States. The only one, by the way, who signed on all three documents, the three basic documents of creating the American Commonwealth, were the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, which was the first Constitution, and then the Constitution of the United States. He's the only one. Like George Washington didn't sign them all. He is the only one that signed all three documents. There was even a fourth document. And Benjamin Franklin wrote an autobiography, and he's a very interesting story. He came to Boston as a very poor person. He worked his way up. He became very successful. Eventually, he moved to Philadelphia, and he had careers as an inventor, as a printer, as a businessman, as a politician, many, many different roles. And as a young man who was struggling to make his way in the world, he wanted to get, he had ulterior motives. He wanted to get connected to important, wealthy people. And he says, what's the best way to ingratiate yourself with an important person? So listen to Franklin's thinking. He really thought this out. He says, to ask the person for big favors, he would resent it. He would feel that he's being imposed upon. For me to do favors for him, he would also resent it, because nobody likes to be beholden. I don't like to feel I'm in your debt. So Franklin said, the best way to get people to like you is to ask them for a small favor that's very easy for them to do, that's not inconvenient, but it makes them feel important because they were needed. See his chiddush. His point is, don't do favors for people. Let them do favors for you, but let them be small favors. Now, again, Franklin, his whole cheshbon was to ingratiate himself, etc., so that what the motives were not important here. But what Franklin is teaching us is that sometimes the greatest gift you can give somebody is the gift of making them feel that they're needed in your life. Now, this is important, because imagine a man that hears this talk about the important thing is to give. So he comes home and basically tells his wife, I don't need you to do anything. Don't cook, don't make a meal. I am here to do the giving. Well, that's going to make you feel real important. How does it make a woman feel, or vice versa, when the message she gets is she's only there to be on the receiving end? People don't like to be on the receiving end of favors. So part of the very deep insight is the way you give to another human being is to be willing to be vulnerable enough to make the other person realize that you need something from them as well, right? So you actually give by learning to take. Because when you learn to take, what you're giving the other person is the gift of self-esteem, of dignity, of importance in your life. And that could be more important than whatever physical favor you're actually doing. And that's sometimes difficult for men, without overgeneralizing. You know, men pride themselves on self-sufficiency, control, autonomy, not needing other people. But part of the key to creating a relationship is to be willing to be vulnerable enough so that the other party knows that you need them in your life and you're willing to take. That's very different than selfish taking. That is an attitude of taking in order to foster a godly sense of giving. You know, one of the cliches they have, but you know, cliches are almost always true. That's why they're cliches. Cliches are usually exactly right. That one of the differences between men and women is that men hate to ask directions. If we're lost, we just don't like to ask directions. Or maybe we'll break down after 2 or 3 hours. But a woman, like, you know, you could be leaving the driveway and your wife might say, let's ask directions. And the man says, you know, we can drive around a little bit. Now, that is why GPSs were invented by men. Baruch Hashem, the GPS that you have in the car now, don't have to ask directions anymore. I can do it myself. Now, why is this so? So there's actually a Kabbalistic reason why men don't like to ask directions. It's actually a very profound reason. In the creation story, there first was Adam and then there was Eve. Adam's initial exposure to the universe was in a state of aloneness. Partnership came later. So consequently, the male's essential identity is one of autonomy and individuality. So for a man to reach out and need somebody else is an assault on his basic existential nature. Because there was, primevally, so to speak, there was man in a state of aloneness. God said it wasn't good. But man's initial state was aloneness and solitude. There was an Adam without an Eve, but there never was an Eve without an Adam. Eve came into the world in the context of relationship, in the context of community. So therefore, the notion of collaboration, the notion of relationship, the notion of doing things together is not a contradiction to her essential sense of self, because her sense of self always existed in the context of a community. So if a man feels by asking directions, somehow I am less of a man, because my essential identity required individuality, for a woman to reach out to someone else is not really a threat. In fact, I'll tell you, I was a law professor for many years, and it's very interesting that right now, at least in the United States, I'm not sure how it is in South Africa or other countries, by now a majority of incoming law students, which means a majority of graduating lawyers every year, are women. It's a slight percentage difference, like 51% to 49% at this point. Now, this has been true now already for almost 20 years. Now, in the legal profession itself, you still have a majority of men, because many women graduate with law degrees and in fact don't work. They raise their children or the like, but in terms of graduates, there are actually more. Now, there has also been, during this time, a major change in the legal profession, and people are arguing whether it's because of women, and that is, the old model of law was essentially like a dragon slaying model. It was called the adversary system. It was a battle, litigation. In litigation, essentially it's like a duel. In other words, one side is designed to crush the other side. You're supposed to have a winner and a loser, right? One lawyer's job is to kill the other lawyer. Now granted, in modern day and age, they don't use guns or weapons to kill, but they use litigation tactics. Now, this is based on the idea of one person wins, the other person loses. That's called a zero-sum game, meaning there's one winner, one loser. It's either this side or that side. But what has happened in the legal profession is that in recent years, there's much more of an emphasis on collaboration, on compromise, on mediation, on bringing people together to, instead of one person getting everything he wants and the other person getting nothing, whichever side it goes, the movement has been to create solutions in which everybody gets something, and it's called a win-win solution as opposed to a win-lose solution. And people are speculating that perhaps this is a result of the entry of women in the law profession, in which women sees things much more in the sense of community, as opposed to the man that looks at the individual unit. Again, that's a speculation, but the point that I want to bring out is that since a man's sense of self is his individual identity, he may decide to be the giver and not the taker, but I just want to communicate the very important idea that to be a giver, you must be a taker. Because by taking, you are giving the other person a sense of their worth, a sense of their dignity, a sense of their self-esteem. By the way, one might even speculate, people sometimes raise the question, how come women don't count for a minion? Right? For a minion, right? Only men can be a minion. Women cannot be a minion. Now, this is only a speculation. I don't have a source for this, but I think it's a thought that might be worthy. And that is, what is the purpose of a minion? A minion is designed to teach a man that certain things you can't do by yourself. No matter how righteous you are, no matter how wise you are, you cannot say Kaddish, you cannot say Kedusha, you cannot repeat the Amidah unless you have 9 other people. Meaning, it tells a man, learn how to be part of a community and not focus on autonomy and individualization as the basis of your strength. It could very well be that since the purpose of minyan is to communicate something that somebody needs to learn, it is only the man that needs to learn it. The woman does not need to learn it. She already lives by that methodology. So it could very well be we do not need the minyan for those who have already internalized that particular lesson. Right? That might be an aspect of it. Now let's move to the next part. So we've analyzed only one half of the verse. it is not good for man to be alone. Or the way we retranslated it, man cannot be in a state of goodness if they are alone, because in a state of aloneness they are taking, and only in relationship can there be giving, and it is giving that makes a person godly. And then I just added the qualification that true giving requires openness to take. That's really a subcategory of giving. But now let's look at the next verse, next part of the verse. Let us make a helpmate to be opposite. A helpmate to be opposite. Now here we have a question. The Talmud asked the question. Helpmate or opposite? Opposite implies we're fighting. Right? So which is it? Ezer or Kenegdo? So the Talmud says the following. The Talmud gives a pragmatic answer. Ezer, if you merit, you have a helpmate. If you don't merit, fights. Right? Sometimes you get this, sometimes you get this. But in the Hasidic literature, we have a much deeper explanation. And the much deeper explanation is, it is precisely in the opposition that there is the ultimate help. What do we mean by this? I once saw in an airport a wind-up toy, a little doll that you wind up, and this was a toy that was made for beleaguered executives in business who felt they were not appreciated. And the wind-up toy would just say, "You're great, you have wonderful ideas. Those people are stupid because they don't appreciate it." Because, a person needs that type of confidence. And if you're not getting it from human beings, hopefully the wind-up doll will give you some positive feedback, some stroking. Now, in truth, part of the function of a relationship is to give people that encouragement. And I'm not going to deny that that's very important. A person has a tough day, whether it's a wife or a husband. They weren't appreciated at work, or they had a rough day with the kids, or different things happen. It's important to come home and someone gives you, compliments and gives you appreciation. And that's very, very important. It is very important, that type of emotional support. But that's not all a relationship can be. If all you have is a relationship with a clone who sees the world exactly as you see it, where is there going to be a growth? All of us have limitations. All of us, our vision is limited. Our insight is not complete. We only see part of a picture. If I have somebody who sees the same fragmented reality that I see, how will I ever become a better person? How will they ever become a better person? And that's why it is precisely the fact that men and women perceive the world in fundamentally different ways. Right? The book of John Gray, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. In fact, that might be one of the arguments. I mean, there are many other arguments. One of the arguments against same-sex marriage is that you're not going to get this different way of viewing reality. It's precisely the fact that I see things one way and my wife sees things a different way. That doesn't have to be a source of bitterness or animosity. It can be an enriching sense of the richness of reality by having two pairs of eyes. And therefore, when the Torah says, helpmate to be opposite, it's not a contradiction. It's precisely the different ways women see reality and men see reality that bring us together in a wholeness, so that the man can incorporate the insights of the woman and the woman can incorporate the insights of the man. And as a result, each person becomes greater and deeper and broader than they otherwise would have been, by paying attention to each other's understanding of the world. That is why Abraham, who represents kindness, needed a wife, Sarah, who knew when to be strict. Yitzchak, who represents a strict, uncompromising approach to spirituality, needed a Rebecca who was kind. The notion of opposites attracting is very real, in the sense that each one is needed to bring out qualities in the other that would otherwise be dormant and not apparent. Of course, this is reminiscent of a famous story of George Bernard Shaw and Isadora Duncan. Isadora Duncan was a famous dancer, a ballerina, in the I guess at the end of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century. And she was a bit of a flirt. So at a banquet, she once turned to George Bernard Shaw and said, you know, Mr. Shaw, with my beauty and your brains, we could produce wonderful children. So Shaw is said to have remarked, he was a bit of an acerbic curmudgeon. He said, well, that would be true, but what if the kids have your brains and my looks? Then we're going to be in trouble. Now, it is possible, indeed, sometimes with a marriage, that each one incorporates the negatives of the other. And you lose your power. That's an unfortunate situation. It's like John F. Kennedy once remarked when he came to Washington, D.C. He was asked what were his impressions of Washington, D.C. So he said, Washington, D.C. is a city of northern charm and southern efficiency. Now, I don't know if you know the United States so well. The northern part of the United States, the East Coast, is known for efficiency, but not charm. The South is known for being not that efficient. Things move slowly, but it's charming. Let's say Savannah, Georgia, whatever. So he said Washington had the worst of both. Washington is between the North and the South. They have the efficiency of the South and the charm of the North, right? So that's like the George Bernard Shaw thing. So you got to be careful about that. But at least in an optimal sense, when you have these opposite tendencies coalescing, it's not simply woman is this and man is that, but the man incorporates the goodness and the truths and the insights of the woman into his view of reality, and the woman incorporates the insights and the goodness and the truths of the man in her version of reality. And each one sees a larger, richer, more vivid reality than they would have seen by themselves. And that's a very, very important idea, that we grow from being exposed to different ways of looking at reality. The man-woman dynamic is so important in that way. In fact, that's how we grow in Torah learning. The Gemara gives us the story about the great Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan was one of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud. And Rav Yochanan had a brother-in-law, a man who married his sister, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. And this itself was a very interesting story. Rav Shimon ben Lakish had an earlier career in his life. He was actually a highway robber. And he once accosted Rav Yochanan, was going to kill him. And Rav Yochanan convinced him not to do it. Rav Yochanan said, if you study Torah, you can marry my sister. Of course, the sister wasn't asked about that, but this was Rav Yochanan's deal. And Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, married the sister. He became a great Talmid Chacham, a great scholar of the Torah. And he would debate with Rav Yochanan. Many, many arguments in the Talmud are between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. And it is said that every time Rabbi Yochanan would say any teaching, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish would ask him 24 questions that Rabbi Yochanan had to answer. As it were, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish died, and he was replaced by another great rabbi. And this other great rabbi was very supportive of Rabbi Yochanan. Every time Rabbi Yochanan said something, the other rabbi would give him 24 reasons why he was correct, 24 proofs. So Rav Yochanan started crying, and Rav Yochanan said, alas, alas, for the loss of my beloved Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So the students asked Rav Yochanan, why are you so unhappy? Rav Shimon ben Lakish used to give you problems all the time, and this rabbi is giving you proofs that you're right. It's even better. So he says, I don't need a yes man. I don't need somebody to tell me I'm right all the time. If I didn't think I was right, I wouldn't say it. But when I was challenged, I had to delve deeper into the topic, and we understood things better, qualifications, analysis. If I was wrong, I would change my position. If I was right, I would understand it better. People understood it. In other words, we understand by challenge, right? So the notion of wanting a yes man or a yes woman is very appealing on one level, but ultimately it's destructive, because the deepest, most creative level of relationship is when parties can see things in a different way, and then they become enriched by those perceptions. Now, all of us know that for the past 40 years, there's been a big movement called feminism, and feminism itself has gone through stages. In fact, now it's either called stage 2 feminism or it's called post-feminism. And what is the difference? Early feminism tried to obliterate the distinctions between men and women. It basically tried to say that the distinctions between men and women are social conventions that are just conditioned by behavior. There is no innate genetic difference, and therefore women have to be as much like men as possible, in fact, even to the degree that they dress the same for a while and the like. So first wave feminism was the notion of obliteration of gender distinction, in the notion of creating a genderless society. Now, in many ways, if you think about it, that could be the ultimate insult to women, because it's basically telling a woman your only value is the degree you could be like a man. I mean, that's a very subtle, maybe not so subtle, put down of a woman's importance. Second generation feminism, or post-feminism, realizes the other way around. It's viva la différence, meaning to say men and women view reality in very different ways, and the quest for equality of dignity should not obscure the distinctiveness of gender perspectives. Well, in many ways, this is really a catch-up game to the Torah, because the Torah believes men and women are equally beloved by God. They are equally important in God's eyes. They are in the image of God. They have godly souls. But equality of dignity is not the same thing as sameness of function. And we recognize that it's precisely the uniqueness of men and women that create a wholeness in the world. And if you try to obliterate distinctions, you are actually destroying the unique perspectives that the feminine soul will have. Now, there was a social scientist in Harvard University, I think she may have died recently, Carol Gilligan, who in the 1970s, when first wave feminism was still very strong, she actually wrote a book to disprove that thesis, that men and women see the world the same way, and it's just a question of social conditioning. She wanted to show that there's an innate difference in perceiving the world, and she wrote a book called A Different Voice. And she tried to prove, still a controversial book, but she tried to prove her thesis by administering a series of tests to very young children, 5 to 7. Now, if you're a diehard feminist, you could say, well, even then it's too late. They've already been conditioned. But she picked an age where the roles were not so differentiated yet. And by administering the test, she was able to show that even at the youngest ages, boys and girls answered questions in a different way. And I'll give you one example from the test. She asked the following question. Let's imagine you have a child, and the child is sick. The child might die. And the only medicine that can save the child is in a drugstore. And the drugstore is closed for the night. And it won't open till 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. the next day. Child might die. What do you do? So every single boy, without question, said, you take a rock and you break the window and you take the medicine. Now, that's a perfectly valid answer, because there's no question, halachically as well, there's no question, if in order to save a life you have to do something like that, you do it. Good answer. Every girl also said, you break the window, but they said, but you should leave a note for the owner to explain what it is that you did, or call the police ahead of time and say, this is what you're going to do. Now, what is the significance of this difference? She made the point that, again, these are typical patterns of thinking. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. Males tend to think in binary terms, meaning to say they identify the most important aspect of a situation, and they focus on it with a laser-like intensity to the neglect of what you might call peripheral relational ideas. So a man sees a problem and sees, problem, child is dying, can be rescued only by medication. Most important thing is get that medication, which is true. Women see the world more as an interlocking context of relationships. So even though they may focus on getting the medicine, they will not do so at the expense of other relationships, such as store owner, community being afraid of crime, whatever it would be. So she said that men are like a light switch, on or off. and women are like a spider web. She called it Charlotte's Web versus Jake's Ladder. And that's a very interesting idea. In fact, this may explain why women are better multitaskers in some ways, and men are better at intense concentration on a single problem. Okay, it's an interesting idea that which is a better skill? This is exactly the point. You can't say one is better than the other. Each has utility, each has value, each has necessity. The world needs both types of modalities of thinking. Okay? So it's not a question of better or worse, it's a question of different ways of looking at reality. Every morning, an Orthodox Jewish man says a bracha, "Blessed art you, God, who did not make me a woman." And the reason for that technically is a man has many commandments that women don't do. A man has tzitzit, a man has tefillin, a man reads the Shema, and therefore we give thanks to God for not doing, for being able to do these commandments and not being a woman who doesn't have those commandments. But I would say this, again, there are many interpretations, and that is a woman has fewer direct commandments to do. But a woman's divine service is actually more difficult because it's basically focused on cultivating her own private, inner, emotional relationship with God. It's as if to say, the man says, "Thank God I am given instructions." The woman is given fewer instructions. In fact, it's almost like saying, I don't want to turn it into men or women are better than them, but it's almost like saying, like a private in the army might say, "Thank God I'm not the general." Because the private just follows the orders. The general has to think about the strategy. And the very fact that women have fewer guideposts gives them a more complex spiritual life because they're given less direction. So one can thank God that at least I'm given the instructions, but that doesn't mean the woman is less. It may even mean the woman is more. I don't want to necessarily say that, but it's like the general and the private. Thank God I'm not the president. The president has so many difficult decisions that are to be made. But you're correct. That is, of course, a very, very difficult question. So this is the idea of men and women seeing the world in a different way, and that's a real strength in marriage. That's a real strength in Torah study. That's a real strength in everything. We learn from being exposed to different viewpoints of things. Why shouldn't we have mixed classes? Why shouldn't men study with Torah with women? So I'll tell you the truth. In truth, that could be a very positive thing. But the reason we don't do it is because there are certain negatives that are associated with it. I mean, as you know, within the Torah community, there is a great concern for a need for boundaries between men and women. For example, we don't, unless we're married, we don't touch or hug or kiss or the like, because it is thought that without boundaries, one could easily slide into impropriety and the like. So essentially, it is a trade-off, and I'll agree with you, that we are sacrificing something by not getting the feminine input, but it may be a necessary sacrifice to preserve modesty and preserve the appropriate boundaries. Now, you know, people look at the Torah and say, oh, how old-fashioned. You know, the Torah says, can't hold hands, can't kiss if you're not married. The Torah says women have to dress a certain way. The Torah says I'm not allowed to be alone with a woman in a room, right? Because temptation, I might have intercourse with her. I mean, are men animals? You know, after all, if anything, by the way, all of these say a lot of things about men, not women. They basically say you can't trust a man. And that's why we have all these rules. It's not putting down women. It's basically saying we're animals, right? So we might get offended by that. But I just want to point out, and again, I speak from the United States because I have more experience there, that, you know, in the United States over the past really 20 years, there have been a lot of litigation in an area called sexual harassment. It used to be called sexual harassment. I don't know when they changed the accent on the syllable. And sexual harassment are lawsuits, litigation, brought by women who claim that their bosses either inappropriately touched them, fondled them, or made sexually suggestive comments, or in some extreme cases, even raped them, and the like. And many companies have been sued for this, and many companies have paid very heavy damage judgments. And many careers have been ruined as well. So as a result, what companies have started doing is they've started publishing sexual guidelines in their employment manuals. I'm not sure if you have this in South Africa, in which the employers are now recommending how men and women should behave in the workplace. These are Fortune 500 companies. We're talking about General Motors, big companies, IBM. And the most amazing thing is, you read these guidelines, and it's almost like it's a translation from the 15th century Shulchan Aruch. It basically says that when men are talking to women, the door should be open, and there should be other people in the building. Women are instructed or are encouraged to dress in a modest way, not exposing, too much of their leg or too much of their arm. I mean, it's an amazing thing. All of these things that people said old-fashioned, primitive, the world now realizes that you need certain boundaries, that the sexual desires of people are very strong and are sometimes uncontrollable, and God made it that way, so there should be passion in a marriage. But because of that, we need boundaries, we need limitations. And what's interesting is, in the working world, this has become increasingly recognized. Very, very fascinating. So an IBM employment manual looks like it's a translation from Shulchan Aruch, Even Hoezer. So your point is very well taken. I actually do think that we are losing a valuable perspective, but it essentially would be justified because of the greater risks that would occur not that way. But that's why, if a person's married, a person should study Torah with his wife. You can get some perspectives that you otherwise wouldn't get. Okay, so this is what I want you to think about in terms of relationships, how important it is. One final point, then we'll break. We have the 10 Commandments, and everybody knows that the first 5 of the commandments are between man and God, primarily, how to serve God. And the second 5, don't kill, don't steal, are between man and man, interpersonal. Now, we also know that there are many more words on the first 5 than the second 5. The first 5 are longer, and the second 5 are staccato. Don't kill, don't steal, like 2-word commandments. Now, according to rabbinic tradition, the amount of surface area that was covered by the 2 sides is exactly the same. So think about it. If you have fewer words covering the same surface area, that could only be accomplished if the letters were bigger. So the letters were bigger on the interpersonal than they were for the God ones. Now that means when the Jewish people see the 10 Commandments from a distance, which commandments do they see first? The interpersonal, because they're larger. So that shows you that religion is not only about man and God, but perhaps the mitzvahs of how we relate to each other are even more important.